So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is our first ever Mars Society UK Students event. If you are not a member, it's free to join. If you're not a student, join our big brother organization, the Mars Society UK. If you are a student, it's free to join. I'll put the link in the chat so that people can access that. But yeah, this is our first event, and we, as I'm sure everyone's been here for a few minutes now, so I'm kind of superseded here, but this is James Burk. He is the head of communications for Mars Society International. In trying to sell this event, I've come to just call him a big name on campus, because effectively he's involved in everything, as you'll shortly see. And yeah, James is going to give us an interesting talk about the future of Mars. So James, when you're ready, take it away. Just sorry, hang on, caveat to that. I'm told apparently it's quite a good thing if everyone turns off their video, so that then the thing runs well. But yeah, now James, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to mention that. Please do, when we get to questions, please turn your video back on and ask your question. But while I'm speaking, if you wouldn't mind keeping your video off and your sound muted so that we can have a clean recording, we'll go ahead and put this out for everyone. So thank you very much for inviting me. My name is James Burk. I'm the Director of Information Technology for the Mars Society. I'm a founding member, and I also lead our Seattle chapter. And so I've had those three roles for over 10 years now. I started with the Mars Society in 1998 when we were founded as an organization. And my time with the Mars Society actually goes back a little bit earlier. I read Dr. Zubrin's book, The Case for Mars, when I was a senior in college in 1997. That was also the year that the Mars Pathfinder mission landed on Mars, and the Sojourner rover drove around on Mars. That was the first rover ever. And it excited a lot of people, including myself. And Dr. Zubrin had been trying to get people interested about Mars since the early 90s. He wrote his book to talk about how you could get to Mars with humans very cheaply and using the resources of Mars to help you with your mission so that you didn't have to bring as many things from Earth. It really, his work transformed the way people thought about going to Mars with humans. And he founded the Mars Society to make that a reality. Share my screen here. And so the Mars Society was founded in a conference in 1998. 700 people attended, and we all signed a declaration called the Founding Declaration that talked about that we would someday settle Mars and we would work towards that goal. And I can tell you, after being at this now for 23, 24 years, I guess, almost, that we are making a lot of progress, that it's amazing how much progress we've made since the organization was founded. I also want to direct your attention to the flag right behind me. This is the Mars flag. It was designed by Pascal Lee, and it symbolizes our future on Mars. The three colors you see are red, green, and blue. The red stands for Mars as it is today. It's the red planet. Someday we will be able to go there and begin growing plants and begin terraforming the atmosphere. And so we will make Mars green, and then eventually we will make Mars blue, just like the Earth. It'll be a blue planet. It has all the ingredients to be another home for humanity, just like the Earth. And it's rare in the solar system. That is one of the only places, Titan maybe being another, where you have all the ingredients to have a human civilization. Unlike the moon, where the moon is so dry for most of the surface that if there were concrete on the moon, you would mine it to get the water out. Unlike the moon, Mars has all kinds of different elements. You have liquid water. In some cases on the surface, you certainly have frozen water on the surface all over the planet. And you have you have natural gravity that's a little bit more than the moon. You have everything you need to build a human technological civilization on Mars. And so that's what our goal is at the Mars Society. Our flagship project, when we first were started, was we were trying to build, we're trying to take steps towards building what you see here, which is a rendering of a permanent base on Mars. And so what we first did in the early 2000s is we built the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station in Devon Island, Canada. It's within the Arctic Circle. It's in land now called Nunavut, Canada. And it grew out of a series of NASA projects called the Hot and Mars project, where they were going every summer up to Devon Island to study the environment. It was a Mars analog environment, and practice living and working there. And so we decided that as an organization that was a great place for us to build our first analog research base. Now today in 2021, there are a lot of analog research bases around the world, but we were the first to build one. We were the first to build a permanent analog research base, and this is it here. We've inhabited this base periodically. It's very expensive, as you can imagine, to mount an expedition to the Arctic Circle. It costs on the order of about $100,000. We have to charter a plane to get there. There's no local airport. We have to land on the snow on a makeshift airfield, and we have to bring everything we're going to need for that campaign. So the last time we sent a crew up there was a few years ago. It was part of the Mars 160 crew that spent 80 days at the MDRS and planned to spend 80 days in the Arctic. And we unfortunately haven't been able to send anyone back since then. It's, as I mentioned, very expensive. So instead of being stalled by that, what we decided to do in the year 2001 was build our second base in Utah, in the United States, in southern Utah. And this is called the Mars Desert Research Station. And I've been to the Mars Desert Research Station. I'll mention that a little bit more, but we've had over 250 crews. I think we're coming up on 250 crews. We've had over 240, I'd say. And over 1,500 crew members individually have gone and stayed at the station. They typically stay for 2 weeks at a time. And they do a program of research and exploration. They practice living and working on Mars. They pretend that they're actually on Mars. There's certain mission rules that we have while we're in the simulation, that you're not allowed to go outside without a spacesuit on, and you have to sort of follow different procedures to go through the airlock and don and doff your suit to go on EVA outside. It's a very realistic experience, and what we're doing as a program of research is researching the human factors challenges of living and working on Mars. Individual crews will bring their own research, and different crew members have had research in the fields of biology and geology and medical, engineering, technology. But overall, the program is focused on the human factors research. And so we have some ongoing research projects that look at human psychology, that look at how crews work together, power dynamics between crews, on things of that nature. Here's what the facility looks like today. You can see we have the main habitat on the left, which is a simulation of a landed spacecraft on Mars using the Mars Direct plan. It's a 2-deck building. On the upper deck are the crew quarters with 6 staterooms and a common area. And on the lower deck is a research lab area, as well as a EVA prep room where all of our simulated spacesuits and backpacks and helmets are. There's 2 airlocks, one on the front of the base that you can see there, the silver door, and then one in the rear. Immediately to the right is the green hab, which is a greenhouse, and that's where we grow plants. It gets very hot in there. It's the Utah desert, so it's hot already, but inside that greenhouse is probably the hottest room I've ever been in my life. Pretty frequently gets over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's where we grow plants. We usually have a campaign of growing different foods for the crews to supplement what they eat. Also some other biological experiments from time to time. On the far right is the Science Dome. And that's a half geodesic dome. And that's a pretty large workspace with science equipment. It's actually one of my favorite places on the campus. It's a nice, very roomy place. It's more climate controlled than the other buildings, so it's kind of nice to be in, and it's very roomy. And then kind of in the middle right is the Musk Observatory. That's a robotic, or that's a astronomical observatory that we built, named after Elon Musk, because he donated $100,000 to get this project started back in 2002. And we also have another observatory called the Robotic Observatory that's fully automated, that people control over the internet. We also have a large solar panel that's off screen here. That's one of the two ways the campus is powered, as the solar array is the primary power system. And then the backup is this small generator that you can see just next to the science dome that's in red. And that's a diesel generator. We use rovers to get around. We have off-road vehicles that we call rovers. They're actually Polaris Ranger EVs. It's kind of like a cross between a golf cart and a pickup truck, but it's an electric vehicle that can go off-road, and we can put two people fully geared up in the driver and passenger seat with a cargo bay behind them. And then on the bottom of the screen are our ATVs that we often use when we're not in sim. And those are a lot of fun to just ride around the area. But in general, during sim, we try to stick to the hardware you would actually have on Mars. And it's more realistic to have more of a pressurized or larger vehicle than an ATV to do long terrain traverses. I was able to go to the MDRS in 2018. This was my crew. I was the executive officer, and we spent a week there. We had a great experience. It was way too short. We really were getting into the swing of things when it ended. It took us a couple days to kind of get into the swing of things. I would compare it most to scuba diving trips I've been on, where you're with a group of people and you wake up and you eat breakfast and you talk about where you're gonna go that day, where you're gonna go diving, or in our case, where you're gonna go on EVA, and then you gear up, you go outside and you go do your exploration. It's basically like heavy backpacking. You come back inside after an hour or two, you're completely exhausted, you're drenched in sweat, and you sit down and have some water, have a meal, and you reflect on your day, and then you write your crew reports at night and do some other tasks. And then you just keep doing that every day for a week. And that was just so much fun. That was our crew. I was the executive officer of this crew, and fortunately, I'm gonna get to go again later this year. So this is my neck, and this is another few pictures of me while I was there. I got to do experiments that was essentially a Raspberry Pi based computer that we could use to track the bandwidth usage we had, and also things like the crew schedule and time and weather. And I mounted that on a touchscreen device to the wall. I'm holding it there in that picture. But it was also a workstation that we could use to write reports on. It was a full Linux-based workstation. That was my experiment during the mission. So as I mentioned, I'm going to get to go again. And this is my crew coming up this year. We're going to go in December. We've actually been together for about 1.5 years now, planning this out. We have quite a few experiments that we're working on right now. And we actually have 2 with the Nexus Aurora team that we're very excited about as well. The Nexus Aurora team, who's on this call, a few of them are on this call. They're building some robotic devices to capture samples, so little mini rovers that are sort of a robotic swarm. And then also there's a farming system, a farming apparatus that can water plants and monitor them, that we're going to install in the Green Hab. So those are 2 experiments among many we have that we're planning out right now, and we're very excited. My crew here, I'm the only American, the rest of them are French and Belgian, and we're very excited to be working together on this. So we're looking forward to it. I was just meeting with a couple of them this morning to go over some of our experiments as we're going through working on those schedules and getting those things ready. So very excited. But those bases are not the only thing the Mars Society does. So here's I mentioned a little bit before we started about to the folks on the call about our conference last year. This was a really huge deal for us. We have an annual conference every year. It's usually in the fall. Last year it was in October, and this year it'll be again in October, but normally it's an in-person event. Normally we have it at a university in the United States. And last year, because of COVID, we had to do it online. And like a lot of other space advocacy groups, we kind of had a decision to make. Do we cancel our event, or do we try to do something online? And Dr. Robert Zubrin didn't want to skip a beat. He said, let's put on an online event that's not unlike anything anyone's ever seen. So he made that statement, and then he immediately looked at me and said, James, how do we do that? So I said, well, we're going to need to get Zoom, and we're going to need to figure out how to do like 100 different Zoom sessions at once, over 4 days. And so we found this great software called Attendify. We partnered with them, and it really helped us organize the event. People could log into Attendify, and then they can find their Zoom session and join it. And it was really seamless. Like, we didn't have one technical flaw the whole 4 days. It was amazing how smooth it went. Because it was an online event, we were able to ask every speaker we would ever want to have to come speak, and we got all of them, including Elon Musk and the NASA administrator at the time, James Bridenstine. Also, every NASA Mars mission was represented. We either had the project scientist or the project manager or some other high-ranking person for that mission. It was really an amazing event. And because it was all on Zoom, everything was automatically recorded in the cloud, and we were able to put it online on YouTube. Within 2 weeks, we had the entire conference online on YouTube, which was also a record for us. We had 10,000 attendees registered at the end of the conference, and we had over 150 speakers. And we had, during Elon Musk's presentation, we had 100,000 people watching in the first 24 hours. I was running that Zoom call. You can see it there in the top right. That's literally the Zoom call with myself and Elon Musk from the Tesla factory in Fremont, California on an iPad, and Robert Zubrin from his office in Colorado. And 1,900 of our friends were in the Zoom call directly. And then about 6,000 or so watching on our live streams on YouTube and Facebook. But that was also getting picked up by CNET and a couple other YouTubers. And so within the first day, we had around 1 million people that saw that event, just Elon's talk. But that wasn't the only thing we did over those 4 days. We had a lot of great other talks. Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator, said some amazing friendly things about the Mars Society during his talk. And then I had a little chat there with George Whiteside, the CEO of Virgin Galactic, because he and I had attended the Mars Society conferences in 1999 and 2000, and I'd met him then. We're about the same age. We're about mid 40s, and both at the time, both of us were just out of college. And so he did a talk back then called Gen X to Mars, because we're both Generation X. And so I just reminded him there in that chat there, Gen X to Mars, we're still doing it. So that was a lot of fun. So that was our conference last year. We're going to do the same thing this year. Hopefully it's just as big a deal, and we're hoping that all of you guys can join us. So October 14th is the first day, and registration's open now. But that's not the only project we work on, and I want to highlight a couple others that I personally work on as well. Marscoin, if you're interested in cryptocurrency, okay, Bitcoin, we have a project for you. This is the Marscoin project. Leonard Lopin is the founder. He's German. He lives in Florida in the US. And really interesting project. It's been going since 2014. And one of the aspects of this project was that they were going to give the Mars Society 500,000 Mars coins, and also Mars One was the other project at the time in 2014 that was kind of the biggest thing going for Mars, humans to Mars. So they also gave 500,000 Mars coins to that. Years went by, and Marscoin is still a viable cryptocurrency. It's being traded on several different exchanges. And Mars One, however, did not work out for Bas Lansdorp and the team there. So I reached out to them. Leonard and I both reached out to them together a couple years ago and said, hey, since you guys aren't really going to need them, why don't you give those Mars coins to the Mars Society? And they agreed. So now the Mars Society has all 1 million that were part of the initial pre-mine, and we haven't sold any. So right now, Marscoin as of today is trading for about 10 cents per unit. And so, so we're looking forward to having this be part of what funds humans to Mars someday, is we have sort of our own Bitcoin-like currency. And the nature of these things is that you could use it for a lot of, you could use a blockchain for a lot of different things besides currency. You can use it for tracking inventory and for things like voting and for sharing information. So Leonard and I are actually working on an experiment that'll be part of my mission in December at the Mars Desert Research Station, where we're going to use it for voting and for inventory. And so we're really looking forward to seeing how the blockchain technologies can be used for Mars exploration. And then finally, I want to highlight my favorite project, which is going very well right now, and that's MarsVR. I had a huge interest a few years ago in starting a virtual reality project for the Mars Society. I had the opportunity to go to NASA's JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where the rovers are managed out of and designed at. And what I saw them doing there during that private tour in 2018 was they had taken all the data from the Curiosity rover and they had merged that into a virtual reality environment. So they'd processed the data, they'd overlaid it with 3D data, and I put on a VR headset and I was standing in front of Curiosity that day, and I could see where Curiosity had been yesterday because there was an overlay with a line and then a little box that said Sol 800. And then I could see where it had been the previous days. There was a path that just went off into the distance of all the days that it had stopped at. And then there was a path forward of what they planned to do. And it was crystal clear. I could look around at all the rocks on the ground and I can just, it was as if I was standing there. And so what the JPL engineers and scientists told me was that that's how they decide where to send Curiosity and what rocks to look at further, instead of poring over a printed out map with a magnifying glass, which is what they used to do. Now they put on a VR headset and that's how they decide where they want to go to explore Mars. Once I took off that headset, it really had a huge impact on me. And the immediate thought I had was more people should get to see what I just saw, that this should be in every school and museum in America and around the world. And so I came back to Seattle and I called up Dr. Robert Zubrin, our president, and I said, how can we do a VR project like that, but have it be available to the public? And he said, well, why don't we start with the Mars Desert Research Station? Let's put that into VR and we can train the crews at home in VR before they go out to Utah. Because often what happens, not only do we have to train, we have to do the same training for each crew that comes in every 2 weeks, and that can get a little tedious for the folks that are there, for Dr. Shannon Rupert and the other folks that are there that do that. But also when you fly out to Utah and you're in the desert, and sometimes it's the first time you've ever been in an environment like that, you get dehydrated, you get a little disoriented. So it's hard to learn as good as you would at home. So we thought if they can do it in VR before they leave to go to Utah, then they'll know the stuff really well. They can practice. By the time they get to Utah, they can just hit the ground running. That was the germ of the idea. But the long-term vision was also this. So imagine the first humans have landed on Mars. And they bring with them rovers and drones to scan the landing site. There's probably also orbital data to scan the landing site as well. But they send all those drones out and they're capturing all this high resolution pictures and 3D data on all the rocks and all the terrain features. Maybe there's ice there that they're looking for. Maybe there's possible fossils or evidence of life that they're looking for. They can scan all that. They can send that data back to Earth and put that, and that data could get processed into a VR environment. And so you could have millions of people back on Earth exploring the landing site along with the astronauts that are there. And the people back on Earth could vote on what do they think is the most interesting place for the astronauts to go. And that they could radio that information back to NASA and the astronauts, and then they can go do that for real. So the idea of astronauts and the general public exploring together using VR, we call that crowd exploring, just like crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, crowd exploring. And so that's one of the things we want to enable with MarsVR, is we want to take baby steps towards that vision. And we can do that using the Mars Desert Research Station. So we started the project in 2018. We had an initial Kickstarter that year. We raised $31,000, and we were able to use that money to fly a drone in Utah and scan a square mile of terrain, a square kilometer, or 2 kilometers roughly of terrain. And also we were able to scan the facilities inside and out using a technique called photogrammetry. And that's the science of taking a real life place or object and turning it into a VR, a virtual representation. So we've had some success doing that. We have not released it to the public yet because we want it to be as good as it can be. We want to clean up all the edges and make sure that it's nice and polished, but also add in some of the training and some of like a guided tour, maybe some voiceovers. And so that's kind of where we left it during the initial round. These were our initial goals for the platform. We wanted it to be a serious research tool first, but we wanted it to be all these other things as well. And if I just talk a little bit about that first bullet, the serious research tool, it's all about those human factors challenges I mentioned. We want to support the work that's already happening. We want to pilot those methods of crowd exploring. We want to have a real-time link between astronauts and VR users. So you can imagine if you have an astronaut on Mars and you have someone back in the base on Mars with VR, they could help guide the astronaut while on EVA. We could actually try that out in Utah. And then finally, we could use this platform to showcase real Mars terrain that's come back from Mars via the NASA missions and the other missions like Mars Express and the Indian mission, Mars Orbiter mission. Any of the data that's been sent back, we can process and try to get that into VR as well. And we've done some preliminary work around that as well. These are the technologies we began using. Unity was the main development platform we settled on to build the VR application. We used photogrammetry, as I mentioned. We used various off-the-shelf and open source imaging and 3D modeling tools. For example, Blender is a free tool. We use Slack for developer communication and GitHub, which is a free tool. And then finally, we're going to put this out on the Steam game platform for distribution. And as well as eventually we're going to build K-12 curriculum and have many different options for training people on how to build things in VR and how to use VR, so that someone that's brand new to VR could really pick this up and use it. And the idea is that students that are non-technical, that are younger, can take advantage of this. This can be a gateway for them to not only learn about Mars, but learn about STEM and science and VR and coding and all those technical skills that are going to help them in their life. And as I mentioned, we are going to open source this. We're going to have the core platform of the MDRS campus and the terrain available for anyone to use under an MIT license. We've already put some of the 3D models on sketchfab.com, And we also have these 360 Matterport scans available as well. So you can actually explore the campus today, understand what our facilities are like and what the terrain around our facilities is like today. And we'll continue to do more open source releases as time goes on. So that's kind of MarsVR in a nutshell. And what's really exciting is we have a crowdfunding campaign that we've been running for the last 2 months that's ending tonight. It's ending in about 12 hours. And the goal was to raise $100,000 US, and we've already exceeded that. We've raised 106 nearly. So I'm very excited about that. What that means is that we're going to be able to do everything we've planned. We're going to be able to have our first public release this year. We're going to be able to add multi-user functionality to the VR application. And we're going to be able to do the training, build the training simulations and procedures that we wanted to have, and get those out to the public this year. And so it's very exciting, and I'm really thankful for all of our supporters and backers that have gotten us this far. So that kind of brings me to the end of my prepared remarks. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions, and I will get to as many as I can, but I wanted to give you my contact information as well. If there's anything that I don't cover today that you'd like to discuss with me afterwards, or if you think of something, I'd love to hear from all of you. You can pick your favorite social media channel, and I'll be on those to answer your questions after this session today. So with that, thank you everybody. And if you have any questions, feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks so much for that, James. That was amazingly interesting. While everyone's thinking of them deep and meaningful questions, I'll kick it off. What is the #1 thing you look for in a crewmate going to the MDRS, and by extension, does the MDRS kind of accurately represent what you'd look for in a Mars crew?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a process to apply to the MDRS, and typically people apply as a group, as a crew. And that's what we did. That's what our crew did. And there's typically specific roles that you have. You normally have someone that's going to be the crew engineer that's responsible for going around and checking all the water tanks and propane tanks and all the gauges and fixing things if they need to be fixed. Usually some handyman skills are required for that type of role. There's also typically 1 or 2 scientists on the crew, so different disciplines like biology and geology, even things like psychology are disciplines that have been at the MDRS during these crew missions. We generally will also have astronomers come because they'll come to use the observatories. So normally 1 to 3 scientists will be on a crew, or people that are studying those things in university, aspiring scientists. And then you'll have a couple folks that have the specific skills of greenhab, so growing plants, and then a journalist is a role, so someone that can write stories and capture people's feelings and perspectives during their mission. And then you have a couple people in leadership of the crew. So you have the crew commander and the crew executive officer, and they may interchange with other roles. But generally you have 1 to 2 leaders that are really going to exercise those leadership skills while you're there, because you're going to have 6 to 8 people working together, isolated in the middle of the Utah desert. There have been some life and death situations where people have medical emergencies, and we have to sort out, okay, do we break sim and take them to the hospital, or do we try to deal with it here with the resources we have? And that's a real question people sometimes have to be faced with. So so I would say, we've had all kinds of people come through the program. People like on my crew, one of the people that was on my mission was a donor. It was a good friend of mine that my wife grew up with, and she had absolutely no skills. She was a college professor in psychology, but not focused on Mars research at all. She was a Star Trek fan though. She had that going for her. And she was worried, like, what am I going to do with all these scientists? I'm like, don't worry, you'll have stuff to do. I mean, if nothing else, you could help me with all the things I have to do, because I'm going to be busy as heck while I'm there. And she had a blast. She had an amazing experience. She ended up doing a bunch of different health and safety roles on the crew. She made sure that everyone was taking care of themselves and was staying hydrated. She did a full inventory of all the supplies on campus, and she went on several EVAs. She got to have the full experience of putting on the gear and going out. So she had a great time, and she had absolutely no skills that normally a MDRS crew member would have. So there's room for everyone is my point. All right, do we have any other questions?
Yes, if that's okay, I hope you guys can hear me. I'm calling from the, thank you. Thanks for the great talk. During our design contest for the Mars City State competition with Nexus Aurora, we had the idea of using virtual reality as a sort of Internet of Things / building information modeling tool, which would exactly catalog every screw, bolt, door, panel, and everything that's actually located on Mars. So you would never, it would never get lost, but there could also be like an exact digital replica of everything that would be on this Mars station in this case. Is that something that might be interesting for you as well? Because for the Mars VR project, I would say that that might actually be worthwhile, because our method of thinking was at least that since everything is worth its weight in gold on Mars, you will not want to lose anything, and everything is a valuable resource, so there's no waste. Is that maybe something that you could maybe in the long term integrate on the Mars VR project? And well, it's great to hear that you already reached the goal.
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. I would say yes. And I would even add, why not put all that on the blockchain? The blockchain is ideally suited for that type of scenario where you're going to keep track of the life history of an object, but have it in a mutable record that can't be changed. So you always see the history, and nobody can go back and do anything silly with it. That's actually something we want to do. The blockchain experiment is something we'd like to do as part of my mission in December. And as far as putting it all in VR, I mean, we are going to do a whole ton of work in MarsVR to add specific objects. We've scanned the rooms inside and outside, but scanning the room doesn't mean that every single object in the room is something you can pick up and use, right? That's not how photogrammetry works. You're literally scanning what you see and capturing the 3D points in space, but it doesn't mean you can actually detach that object from the table it's on. So we actually have to go do that work now. We have to decide, okay, for the training we're going to have, what are all the objects we need for the person to manipulate? And how are we going to build those objects? Are some of these going to be off the shelf things that we just purchase in an asset store? Or can we leverage the community to help us build simple objects that'll be part of the MarsVR open source offering? That's a question we're actually struggling with right now. But yeah, we would love to have, I mean, to your point, every screw on the whole campus. That might be hard to do, but certainly the big stuff I think we will do. We will want to have everything accounted for so that people know what's there. If they're learning about what's on the campus and they've never been there before and they're learning that for the first time in the MarsVR experience, we want it to be an accurate representation of what they're going to have available during their 2 weeks. And you could extend that out to a real Mars mission. You know, if you're going to send a real crew to Mars and there's an existing base there that's been created robotically or landed prior to them on a cargo flight, which is the plan for SpaceX right now. They're going to first send cargo and send a propellant factory and get all that set up and have a base ready, and only then will they send people out. But you can imagine that all that should be inventoried, and you should be able to find something quickly because, you know, it's the 21st century. We shouldn't have to lose things. We should be able to put a little RFID tag on things and find them, or have a record of where they should be. So I think that's a great scenario. I think it's a great use case. Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. Sean, I see you've turned your video on. Do you have a question?
Yes. Hi. I have a two-part question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first part is, so you have a lot of ambitions for what you want to do. So you want to have this inventory system and so on. But to do that, you need to have boots on the ground actually there, people from your organization, most likely. So as an independent organization, what can you do to ensure that you have people over there in the early days of sort of Mars colonization? And the second part is, once people are there, there's going to be a need for broadband, for instance, to communicate with the Earth.
Yes.
So can you see, at least initially, building high gain antennas on the ground, or is it going to be like a Starlink system above? So yeah, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Those are great questions. I'll take the first one first. So having people on the ground, I think, yeah, when we start sending people to Mars, I have no doubt that that among those will be Mars Society members. And I have no doubt that eventually the Mars Society will have our own facility somewhere on Mars that we're operating and we're coordinating with and we're supporting from Earth. I mean, that's just a natural extension of what we're doing now with our 2 analog bases. So how do we guarantee that? I mean, for one thing, we keep doing what we're doing. We already have one person in the NASA astronaut pool that is an MDRS alumnus, Jessica Watkins. She first went to MDRS as a grad student, then she got a job at JPL, worked on the Mars rovers, and then she recently got selected to be part of the astronaut class at NASA. And so we got one NASA astronaut that's a Mars Society member. We likely will have, as SpaceX starts flying their missions in the next 5 to 10 years, we will likely have many people that are Mars Society members as well. So I don't have any doubt we're going to have that problem solved. In terms of broadband, that's a great question. That is actually something that we struggle with a little bit today at the base in Utah. That uses a satellite internet, and it's severely bandwidth limited. And so when you're out there, you don't really have a high bandwidth connection. It's kind of like drinking the internet through a straw. You could pretty much use email, but you can't really do a lot of stuff on the web. You certainly can't do a video call like this one. You certainly can't watch video over the internet. And so that's actually one of the things I'm struggling with is how do I, if I have a bunch of data collection happening on the campus, how do I publish that to the cloud and have a real-time connection? How do I do the VR project activities there? I can imagine having a real-time link while I'm on campus, but having one like me here in Seattle, Washington, down to an astronaut on EVA would be really difficult right now. So we are looking at Starlink as a potential solution, at least I am. There are others in the program that think that having that low bandwidth environment is realistic for what it would be like on Mars. I'm not one of those. So it's one of the things we do debate. For my mission in December, I'm hoping that we can have something like Starlink available to us. We will have a few data collection activities we're doing. So it would be really helpful to have high bandwidth ability. And we can certainly rate limit it or turn certain things off so that people aren't just surfing the web at night. Like that's, I think, the biggest thing that Robert Zubrin and others are worried about is it won't be a realistic experience because people are still connected in that sense. When you get to Mars, there's going to be a light speed delay of sending data back to Earth, and that varies depending on the position of Earth and Mars. So it could be as little as 5 to 7 minutes and as much as 30 minutes. And there's also times when Earth and Mars are on opposite sides of the sun, so you won't have a direct link. So the idea there is there's a couple ways to solve for that. There's a technology called DTN, which is disruption tolerant networking. It's something that was developed by the same person that invented the internet, Vint Cerf. He started talking about it as the interplanetary internet this DTN technology, started talking about it as the interplanetary internet. The idea would be that you can store and forward packets to different planets. So you could still have it, you can have an internet around the Earth, you can have an internet around Mars, and they're connected with each other, but there's a bit, it's handling the delays that are there. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is have a bunch of relay satellites around the sun where you can transfer data through them. And so I think by the time we get to Mars, we will have sorted out how to have high bandwidth connections. They won't be real time, but they'll be near real time, where you'll be able to, for example, browse most of the internet when you're on Mars, because there'll be a copy of it hosted locally on Mars. And at least the top 1,000 or so sites, and all the sites that the crews need to do their work. And also there'll be near real-time communication links that are high resolution video and other high bandwidth ways of communicating. They won't be instantaneous, but you'll be able to like send a video message and the person will get it, you know, within half an hour. So you'll have that. It'll be like we use email today. Email isn't always an instantaneous mechanism. You'll send someone a long message and then they'll receive it and you'll get a reply back. It'll be kind of the same way people work in that sense today.
Oh, thank you very much. I can certainly see how this like demand for internet could attract someone like Google or Microsoft to build the infrastructure there as well and attract funding that way. Thank you very much.
That's a good point. As long as they, as long as SpaceX doesn't do it first, I think they're probably more likely to be the ones, especially with their Starlink that they're already working on here on Earth. And that was actually one of the things I asked Elon during the conference last year is, are you planning to have a Starlink around Mars? And he basically said, yeah, you could do something like that, but I think we have even smarter ways of doing it, which he didn't get into. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I'll unmute. Thanks.
Hi, James.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
No, Cohen, do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. You can jump in.
Yeah, hi again. I'm kind of curious to early exploration and sort of early settlement is like what the technology gaps are that we're missing. So we sort of look at the pathway to having 100 people living sustainably on Mars, and do we have the solar systems? Do we have the sort of agricultural stuff, the life support? Does the Mars Society sort of work with industry leaders to sort of identify these gaps and try and solve them to some extent? Or is that something that's sort of left to the technical people almost?
That's a great question.
I say that partly because I'm working on one of those. I say that partly because I'm working on the tech gap myself.
Yes.
With the farm project.
Yes, you are. Short answer is no. We're not systematically looking at all the technologies that are needed and working with specific companies and research teams to do that. I definitely think that would be a worthwhile thing for us to do. I just think as a nonprofit organization, we have to be smart about what we focus on, and we have to be smart about the resources we do have. And that's why, for the most part, we focus on the analog research spaces and MarsVR. Those are our big projects right now. Long term, I don't have any problem with us doing that. In fact, I did a conference talk that was, how would you start a tech company for Mars that would have not only applications on Earth for the technology, but also helping the settlement of Mars. And there's a whole laundry list of things that need to be developed. I mean, like you listed off a few things. There's probably over 100 different products and technologies and services that that we all need to develop before we get humans to Mars. So there's a lot of companies that haven't been founded yet that are going to be founded and work on those problems. And so you got everyone on this call, that's your call to action. You can go start a tech company that helps us not only get people on Mars and thrive there, but also have applications here on Earth.
Yeah, and I think it's reassuring to see as well that people like ESA and NASA are starting to get wise to this. ESA did a sort of space resources, space to Earth transfer funding round recently, where you can, if you have a way of doing like low water mining, you can get funding to try and make it work on Earth as well. So I think it's good to see that it is happening. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, when you look at the space companies out there today, the industry, there are a lot of companies compared to 10 years ago, but the majority of them are focused on rockets and launch technology. And there's probably too many right now. Those are probably going to shake out. But there's not a lot of companies that are thinking about utilization of those launch capabilities. You know, if you have a rocket that can go to the moon, to lunar orbit, and deliver payload there, there's not a ton of applications for that right now. And so there's a whole, I believe there's a whole set of companies that are yet to be founded that are going to work on things like that. They're going to work on utilization of the Mars surface and the lunar surface and all the things that we're going to need to have humans in those places. And you're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years to 15 years, a lot of companies get started to do that. Go ahead, Koen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I almost sort of have to advertise Nexus Aurora if you say stuff like this, because I completely agree, of course, with you about the companies that will arise that do everything SpaceX is not doing. That's the way that I sometimes talk about it. What I like to say, at least to the people listening, if they're interested, please check out Nexus Aurora. The reason is that we are actually trying to make life multiplanetary besides the rocket itself, which is the most important part to begin with, but all other parts that are required to get there. A lot of projects with a lot of people in the community we're working on, including Sam, who asked the question before me. So whatever your interest is, there is a project for you to work on. And yeah, that's just a very short promo, but I think it's really nice to make life multiplanetary as you do, and we try to work on that. The question that I have is about maybe the October conference of the Mars Society. There has been a lot of competitions scaling up, 1,000, 1 million people city on Mars, which we also entered, of course. But is there a new competition on the horizon from the Mars Society, or is there no competition this time? Because we would like to enter as Nexus Aurora, whatever the competition is. Please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not aware of any competition that we're planning right now. Not to say we won't, but we don't currently have one active this year. And yeah, Nexus Aurora. So just for some context for everyone else, we've had 2 competitions in the last couple of years. We had a 1,000-person Mars colony competition that we were blown away. We had over 100 high-quality entries for that, and we published that as a book. We actually Robert Zubrin handed that book to Elon. That was a great moment. And then the follow-on was the Mars City State contest, which was a 1 million-person settlement. And then you guys actually won that. Nexus Aurora did. And so Nexus Aurora is a collective of people that are organized through the internet that are doing research in a variety of areas. Very impressive organization. At the Mars Society, we have lots of chapters around the world that are similarly organized, of people that are like-minded in their geographic region, that try to work on things. That, you know, maybe they'll do outreach events, or they'll work on small projects together. Our spacesuits, our analog suits at the MDRS, were built by a chapter in the United States. But I've never seen a chapter be as productive as what Nexus Aurora does, and so I'm very impressed at that organization. I encourage everyone to join their Discord server and check out what they're doing and help out. So, Matt, do you
can I very quickly just add that you talked about the talk that you had as well with Elon, the sort of Q&A part. I must compliment you very much, because almost all Q&As with Elon are filled with sort of fanboy-y questions, like, but I really was impressed with the questions that you asked, and the people from Mars Society, maybe through you. Because I always have some remarks like, oh, why didn't you ask this and that and that? But in this case, it was like the first time that I really thought like, oh, this was a really great interview. And I just wanted to say that now that I'm talking to you, my compliments at least for doing an interview that is, at least from my point of view, really worthwhile, with really in-depth questions. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thanks. So thank you. And I hope you get to do that some more in the future.
Thank you so much. It was a really funny story of how I got to do that interview with Elon. I did not have any notice at all. We knew that Elon was going to speak at our conference, but we didn't know when. And I was in charge of coordinating with his team as to get to the logistics of getting him on Zoom. You know, what's the Zoom link going to be for him? You know, and so once we knew what his schedule was, it was going to be 2 o'clock on an afternoon, which is not what we at the Mars Society wanted. We wanted him to be the Saturday night speaker initially, but he wasn't free then. We got him for half an hour in the middle of the day on Friday, which was right in the smack dab in the middle of our conference sessions. So we quickly adjusted, and about an hour before his talk, after I had worked out with the SpaceX team, okay, he's going to be on an iPad, and here's the Zoom link, and did a sound check with them. Once all that was done, I asked Robert Zubrin, well, who's going to ask him questions? Like, is it just going to be you on the call, you and him the whole half hour? He's like, no, you should join and you can ask all the questions. So I'm like, oh, okay. So as I mentioned, there was 1,900 people on the Zoom call. I don't know if you've ever used Zoom webinars, but there's a little Q&A panel. This call doesn't have it, but a Zoom webinar will have a little Q&A panel where people can submit questions, and then someone that's running the call can review them and ask them to the speaker. So the Q&A panel for my talk with Elon had 500 questions. I'd never seen any of them before. I had no prep at all. So I did my best to represent the Mars movement as best as I could and try to ask questions that folks like yourself would want me to ask. And so I did some quick thinking and some quick organization, and it went really well. I was lucky. The first question I asked him, though, was one I wanted to ask, and that was, where do you want to land on Mars? Like, what landing site are you looking at? Is the SpaceX team looking at? And he actually turned it around on me. He said, well, you know, probably somewhere in the high latitudes, probably somewhere where there's water close by. I haven't really thought about it much. What do you think, James? And so, you know, fortunately, I've thought about that a lot, and I've done my own research. I've looked at like the NASA rover candidate sites. And my favorite landing site, which I talked about to Elon, was somewhere called Melis Chasma. It's on the floor of Valles Marineris. It's one of the highest air pressure locations on Mars, and it happens to be a former lake bed. So it's very likely that there's liquid water or frozen water there. Liquid water under the surface, or frozen water under the surface or near the surface. And so, so I jumped right into that, and he's like, oh, interesting. So it was really a fun back and forth. But then I went into just trying to ask good questions, you know. And what was funny is a lot of reporters, especially space reporters, they try to get dates out of him about stuff, and he usually doesn't do that. But I was able to get some dates out of him as to the Starship progress and how soon a humans to Mars mission would be. And after our conference talk, that was like front page news everywhere, like the dates. Nobody like put my name in the story as the question asker, but I was really proud that I actually got some solid information from him that was helpful for everyone else. And so that was another like fun thing that happened that day. Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. It's always fun to talk about that story. Any other questions that everyone has? And also, let me jump into a little bit. You know, a lot of you folks are students, and you're thinking about what to do at the university and what fields to go into. What would be helpful for the Mars movement? What would be helpful for humans to Mars? Is a question I get asked a lot in audiences like yours. So I would say that a lot of the STEM fields are going to be useful. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to go be an astronaut. I'm going to learn like how to fly and how to test fighter planes and, you know, how to work in space. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. If you study technical fields that are related to engineering, related to things like biology and geology, scientific-based fields, biotech, those are all highly relevant for humans to Mars. And the biggest thing you can do is just talk to people about Mars. You know, the general public does not have a solid understanding of what's possible with humans to Mars. And so talk about what you've learned today to your friends and your family and your colleagues. Talk about how excited you are about Mars and try to get them excited too. That's the biggest thing that you can help to make all this a reality, is get the general public excited about Mars. And that's what people tell us at the Mars Society. When I ask real NASA people, astronauts and scientists, you know, I'm just a regular tech guy. I used to work at Microsoft. I'd say, how can I help you guys send people to Mars? That's what they would say, is get the public interested in what we're doing, educate them on what's possible, and the funding will come. And folks like Elon Musk will come up out of the woodwork and start companies and start spending their fortunes on this as well. And that's what's happening. So that's what everyone can do, no matter what your skills are, is talk to your friends about humans to Mars and the possibilities we all have for our future there. Any other questions?
Well, I don't want to take all the questions, so I'm trying to wait, but I see Matt wants to ask a question before I go, or not?
I'm just looking. It's cool. On you go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the interesting things, well, two things. First, a reaction to exactly what you said, James. Also about the STEM fields. What we notice, at least, also at Nexus Aurora, is that a lot of people feel sort of afraid to contribute, and what is because they feel they're not smart enough or not good enough or whatever. But enthusiasm, as you say, and spreading the word is indeed, I could tell from experience, the most important thing. So I would also like to add to exactly your point to all the people listening here, that the fact that you're, for example, a first-year student even, doesn't mean that you're excluded from contributing to making life multiplanetary. Whatever it is that you do, that you're interested in, we need all of it. So if you are good with even like website building or social media skills, whatever, you have no idea how important you are to making life multiplanetary. The fact that we have a lot of like engineer type people who are interested in these kinds of things, yeah, that is very important and very interesting. But all the other types of people, even from psychologists to biologists, geologists, engineers, all of that, you need all of them to form a new society on Mars. So I would definitely add to what James has said in that regard, because we at Nexus Aurora always get this question like, yeah, am I smart enough? Am I good enough? The answer is always actually yes, as long as you have enthusiasm. But now the question, sorry for the long introduction, but regarding sustainability, and it might be a strange thing to talk about regarding Mars, but do you, James, have a sort of a vision on sustainability regarding Mars? Because I myself at least feel that Mars is one of the greatest opportunities in space exploration for sustainability here on Earth, because you have so little to go by. How do you think about that?
How would you define sustainability? Let's start there.
Yeah, so in that case, on Mars, there's limited resources, even though there will be a possibility to get resources from the soil and the regolith. but at least be in balance with that, without requiring, in that case, as we did with the competition, without requiring a constant stream of outside sources or sort of pillaging the land. It's to get some type of equilibrium, I guess, and to live in some form of sustainable or durable harmony with your environment, I would say.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Harmony with your environment. I think that's how I would define sustainability, that you're going to wisely use the resources that you have, that you're not going to waste things. We're very bad about that on Earth, as everyone knows. We are very wasteful. We don't do a lot of true recycling of things, and we don't take advantage of ways to recycle or ways to be smarter about our resource use that we could. And on Mars, you're going to have to be forced to do that, because if there's a part you need from Earth, you're not going to get it for 6 to 9 months or longer, depending on the positions of Earth and Mars at that time. So even if you could order a part right now that you need, it's not going to get there for months. So yeah, there are going to be ways to make resources on Mars. You're going to be able to 3D print things. You're going to be able to create even things like plastics from the Martian resources. Certainly electronics and all kinds of metals. Those are all possible on Mars with some effort. So you are going to eventually be able to have a native engineering and industrial base where anything that you create, anything that you would need to create, you can create with some effort. But that's going to be hard to get to, and certainly the first 10 to 20 years to 30 years aren't going to be like that. As the initial pioneers are going to be very smart about the resources they have and what they're using. So, you know, I think it's a mindset. I don't think there's a single answer to that question. I think it's something that we just need to know going in, is to have that mindset, and making use of in situ resources as much as possible, because those are the ones that are easier to get than what's on Earth. So looking for water and looking for the feedstocks for 3D printing are the early things that people are doing to try to figure out what's the best place to land at. Let me say a little bit too about volunteering. There's a lot of opportunities at Nexus Aurora, but the Mars Society, we also have many volunteer opportunities. I run a lot of technical projects like designing and maintaining our websites that I use volunteers for. And even MarsVR, even though we've raised money to fund MarsVR, we are going to integrate volunteers into the work we do. So if you want to learn how to do virtual reality development or 3D modeling or writing training procedures, like, we can use your help with MarsVR. And there's many other opportunities across the Mars Society. There's things like helping out at the MDRS as a Capcom, a capsule communicator, which you can do remotely. You don't have to go to Utah for that. You actually do that over the internet at nights, US time. And helping with our conference. You know, we're gonna have a lot of volunteer opportunities to help run our conference this year, as we did last year. I think we had about 30 people helped us last year with our conference. And many other opportunities that we have at the Mars Society as volunteers of all skill sets. You don't have to be an expert to help us. And it's actually a great way to learn new skills that you can maybe use in your career.
Can I just jump in there as well and say, just on behalf of of UK Students Mars Society, we're looking in the next few weeks to set up a couple of projects regards research and technology, and particularly looking to put towards literally tomorrow we're launching a bid to try and get a crew together for an MDRS mission. So if you're watching this and you're in the society, keep a weather eye on the horizon. If you're not in the society, what are you doing? Come on, it's the place to be. Sorry,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trevor.
It's in two parts really. Considering mission design for crewed missions to Mars, has the the debate being one, so that the missions are all based on some form of Mars Direct. Secondly, is anyone thinking seriously about generating some form of gravity during the flight, so that they're not in 0G all the way?
Yes, artificial gravity during the transit to Mars is a feature of a lot of the mission plans that people are talking about. It's going to be really tough for people to be in zero gravity for 6 to 9 months and then land on Mars and try to function. So, you know, astronauts that spend that much time just at the International Space Station sometimes cannot, you know, have trouble walking when they land back on Earth and need some time to acclimate. And so I think having artificial gravity as a component of the spacecraft is really required from my standpoint. You're also by doing that, you're also going to eliminate the bone loss that people suffer in zero gravity and some of the other health effects that people suffer. So I think it's definitely a requirement as far as I'm concerned. And then for your first part of your question, there are no active programs or plans to send humans to Mars today that are official. Like, for example, NASA does not have a schedule for humans to Mars. They actually do have one of sending humans to the moon, but it is in flux right now. It's under the previous president. It was going to be 2024, but now that we have a new president, those schedules are being adjusted, and that's just to the moon. So there's no plans officially, although everyone wants to do it, to go to Mars with NASA. Now, Elon's SpaceX company, and these are some of the dates I was able to get out of him when I had the interview last year. He's focused on this development of Starship. Starship is the technology to keep an eye on, because a fully developed Starship is going to enable not only missions to the moon surface, but also missions to the Martian surface. So Starship can land on Mars. That's what its primary goal and technology is being developed to do. And so they're currently working to get Starship, the first stage of Starship, able to go to Earth orbit and back. They're doing landing tests right now. They have not had a fully successful one yet. They had one that worked, but then it exploded about 10 minutes later. So keep an eye on what's happening there. Yeah, minor glitch. So keep an eye on what's happening there. Once they get a Starship that can go to Earth orbit and be refueled in Earth orbit, which is a year or two away, that's a big milestone. And then that will enable the moon mission that they want to do, the mission around the moon, which a Japanese billionaire skateboarding clothing magnate has paid for already. The mission there is called Dear Moon, #DearMoon, and he's going to bring with him some artists and other people on that trip around the moon. That's with Starship. That's probably around 3 years away from now. But once that happens, then Mars is about 2 years from there. And so you'll see the first cargo landings on Mars with Starship around 2026, and a human crew 2 years after that. The missions to Mars can happen every 22 months. That's when the opportunity to send a spacecraft from Earth to Mars opens up. And so during the 2026 opportunity is the earliest that a cargo mission would go. And then 22 months after that would be the human crew. So I believe that within this decade, we will see humans on Mars.
Good.
But a lot of things have to happen before that. Yeah. But certainly we are closer to that now than we have ever been. You know, back in the early 2000s, when the Mars Society was founded in 1998, and then doing our first analog research bases, back then the timeline was 2030s. So we've actually pulled it in a little bit with what Elon's done, and hopefully what we've done and others. So it's definitely within our lifetime. We're going to see the first people land on Mars. We're going to see the beginnings of a permanent base on Mars. All that's going to happen very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Oh, no, there is one. There is one.
Looks like Tom, you have a
Hi, can
question.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so kind of following on from the last question. First of all, I want to say really good talk. I find the whole idea of getting people to experience things in VR and almost having that like practice run of what they're doing before they go to MDRS is a really, really good idea. What I wanted to ask was, have you had any thoughts, or are there any thoughts of developing that further? So kind of putting in more realism into MDRS, so like simulating some kind of gravity or making like a microclimate there, or I don't know what kind of things you can do, because I know that Mars's gravity is about a third of what we have on Earth. So whether you have, I don't know, helium-filled suits or they've got robotic elements to them, just any ideas like that. Just curious if you have anything.
Yes, we're going to do all those things, but we're going to do them in MarsVR because it's a lot cheaper to do it virtually than in real life in Utah. We are, a nonprofit organization. We don't have millions of dollars in the annual budget to fund things like that. We pretty much run the Mars Desert Research Station program on a shoestring budget, on a very limited budget. We're funded by donations. We're funded by the fees that the crew pay. Each crew member pays about $1,000 to $2,000, depending on if they're a student or a professional. And so we do everything on the cheap at MDRS. It's a very lightweight program where we really think through how we're going to spend our funds, and we're trying to be very smart about that. And that's one of the reasons why MarsVR is so appealing to the MDRS program, is because we can try things out, like you mentioned. We can try out what it's like to apply Mars gravity or to build additional hardware and test those out. So all those things we want to do. Ultimately MarsVR is going to be a whole set of modules that you could use to do various things, not just train for MDRS, but also learn about STEM, learn about Mars habitat designs, and have multiple different terrains, not only the one in Utah that we have today, but also ones that we've processed from real life Mars data and real places on Mars. And it would be great to have a lot of the colony designs and city-state designs that have been done through our 2 contests. It would be great to have those in MarsVR as well, so people could kind of scroll through and see what those designs are like and walk around in them as if they were real life designs. Full-size designs. So that's one of the things we'd love to do with MarsVR.
Awesome. It's really fascinating. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any other questions folks have? Oh, those have been really great questions. I'm really glad we got to cover all that stuff.
Yeah, that was a really, I think if that is it, then that was a really brilliant evening. Thank you so much, James, for coming and enlightening. I told people, just come, like, if you want to know what's going on Mars, just come to the evening, just listen to James Burk for an hour and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I'm already getting messages from people being like, wow, we're going to put people on Mars in like 10 years. Like, yeah. But yeah, it's really amazing. Thanks so much for making the time, James. And
thank you.
Yeah, and we hope we can welcome you back at some point in the near future.
I'd love to do this again. Absolutely.
Yeah. Final plug for the society. Join if you haven't already. A few thank yous as well to Krishna, who does the majority of the work for the society, and Patrick and David, who can't be here now because they have lives and jobs and families and kids. But they also set aside vast swathes of their time. So in their absence, thank you to them. But yeah, we have another event on the 21st of May, if I'm correct, from Dr. Zarabitash from the University of Glasgow, who's doing amazing research into entry, descent, and landing, and Martian dust plumes and aerodynamics and that. But it will be a more broad event about how the hell do you land a big 10-ton tin can on Mars intact enough that people can live in it for several years. So that should be really interesting. Hope you can join us then. But other than that, thanks for coming tonight, and happy weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. See you on Mars.
On to Mars. Yeah.
Thank you so much.